This is going to become part of this craft room. I'm going to be storing some stuff in there that I need that I don't use every day. It's something that I found just recently outside of a thrift store. Sitting outside, and I think it was sitting outside because it was full of bugs. Probably somebody donated it from their basement or their shed. It was full of bugs and cobwebs. So whoever owned the store just threw it outside and stuck a sticker of $5. It's actually from between 1940 and 1950, and it's an old toolbox that the guys on the telephone lines for repair, telephone line repair, and they would use this toolbox. I looked it up and they sell for quite a bit actually. This one is missing one of the little thingies here, but that's all that's missing. And got the old handle. I believe that's like hard leather. And this is like a hard fiber case. It's not metal. It's a different sort of material. Yeah, so anyway, it took a long time to get all the bugs out because there's some areas in here that are kind of hollow, like in here. So I put tape in there because I was a little bit afraid of bugs coming out while I was sleeping. And it's got that smell of old tools. Pretty scratched up, all those tools over all those many years being thrown in this toolbox. So I'm going to cover it up with pages from an old book. I've done this with old trunks before, and it gets rid of the smell. At the same time, it just cleans up the inside nice. Hopefully you can see the color that I can see in person. It's absolutely beautiful. I couldn't have chosen a better book. The pages were aged to perfection. I love the yellow tones in there. At the end of this video, I'm going to be showing you how I prepare the book pages and how I apply them. And because I decided to make a tray, so I'm actually popping in with an edit. And I made a tray at the very end, and I'm going to be doing all that, so I thought I'll throw it all in together at the end of this video. Anyway, this is now cleaned up. There's no bad smell. This is a nice way to get rid of bad smells inside of trunks. It doesn't feel creepy in here anymore when I'm reaching in. It used to feel kind of creepy, probably because it was full of bugs at one time, and I didn't like the way it looked in there. But it's beautiful now and ready for making that tray. But first we're going to take a look at the outside before I painted it. So I used craft acrylic paint, and the majority I used was black, and I mixed in a little bit of hunter green so I wouldn't have a straight black. And I'm not done yet. This is just the base coat, and now I'm going to be putting probably a wax on here. I'll show it to you in a minute. And then a sealer, and then I'll work on the hardware. But I like it. So I think we can agree that it is looking a little bit more worth that $5 that I paid. I like the color that I got on there. I did a wax. I've never done this before, but I thought I would just try it out. And it's a dark wax over top. Buffed that out after 3 or 4 minutes, followed the instructions, and then I sealed it all in with a matte sealer. And I didn't want to mess around with the metal parts. This black metal part, I just left that. I didn't paint over that. And all of this hardware here, I just left that as well. The only ones that I wanted to work with was these 3 because if you notice in the last clip, and I should have done a close-up, this one was completely rusted out. If you look closely here, you can see the line from my pliers. I was going to remove this, and then I stopped because I realized whoever put this on here, and it was probably a guy on the job, his toolbox fell apart and he needed to put it back together. So he threaded the wire through this little hole here, around and around and around a number of times, and then he wrapped the wire here so there wouldn't be any sharp edges sticking up. And I think he did a good job. It reminds me of something my dad would have done in a pinch to get him through the day. So it's a little bit of sentimental reasons for leaving it there, and I think whoever done it would be happy to see it today. So I just painted them all black, and then because I didn't have the right paint, I just threw on a gold metallic, and to mute that gold I used that wax again. And I think that actually turned out really nice. And I didn't touch these here, so it matches in nice. So late last night I decided to build a tray, and this was actually really easy to do. This only took me a few minutes before I went to bed. And this is foam board. I used foam board because it was a little bit longer than the trunk, and I just had to cut a little bit off the length. And I didn't have any cardboard that long on hand. And you can get foam board at Walmart or your dollar store. They come in big sheets. And I use tacky glue to glue everything together, and this is the best glue to use on a project like this. And all 4 sides are glued on the inside of the bottom piece. After I got the glue on there, I added masking tape around all the edges just to hold everything in place while the glue dried. This morning this feels really sturdy. I'm super happy with how that feels, and it's going to get even more stronger once I add my book pages. So to cut the bottom piece, of course I just measured the inside of my trunk piece here, and I just wanted a little bit of space between the walls of the tray and the trunk, of course, so you want to be able to take this in and out very easily. So I'm going to be adding a center divider, so I just marked off the center here. I measured with a measuring tape, and now I know exactly where this goes, and I got 13 inches on both sides, so I can add a bead of glue in there. So off camera I actually removed all the side masking tape. I don't really need it there anymore. It did its job. It held everything together while the glue dried. If this was actual cardboard, I would have left the tape in place, otherwise, I mean, it just becomes messy, but this is foam board. It's got a slightly different feel to it, and the masking tape just peels right off, so I prefer to take it off of foam board when I can. So what I'm going to do now is add a bead of glue right along my center line, and then I'll add glue on both sides of my divider. I kind of pushed the sides out when I stuck my divider in there. And I'm just going to eye it up, make sure it's straight up and down. I'm going to use masking tape again just to hold these sides together, to put some pressure from this side to this side, so the glue grabs on this edge and this edge. So I'm going to squeeze, so make sure that I got good contact there, and I'll pull this pretty tight, and I'll just leave that for about 20 minutes, and I'll let that glue dry. So last night, after I got all my pieces together, all my 4 sides on top of my bottom piece, and everything was glued together and taped together, I also do a bead of glue on the outside, and that just adds extra strength. I do this on all my projects when I can. Just run a bead of glue right along the connecting edges, and I'll do them all. Alright guys, in the next clip I'm going to be adding the book pages to the tray, and as promised I'm going to show you how I mix up the glue and how I prepare the book pages for doing this sort of technique. Alright guys, we're going to start mixing up that glue, and we're just using glue and water, and I use a white PVA glue. You can also use a regular school glue, that would work as well, and you mix it in with water. Now if you want an exact recipe, you can Google how to make your own Mod Podge. When I started doing trunks years ago, my youngest child is 17 now, so I was doing this when she was a baby, and I first started off using Mod Podge to put book pages on, and it became very, very expensive to do it that way, so I decided to start using white glue because it dried clear, and I just started mixing water in it just to make it easier to brush on, and I didn't realize that that was actually something that people were doing to make their own Mod Podge. Okay, so I just mixed it up a little bit too runny for me, so I'm just going to put a little bit more glue in there. So the thing I want to say about this is there's probably a science to what people are doing, and there's a reason why they want you to mix in a certain amount with a certain amount. And yeah, you can Google that. I never do it that way, and I'm not going to start now. This has always worked for me, so I'm just going to keep doing what's been working for me. But I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction, of course. So that's a better consistency there. The reason why I put a little bit of water in there is just to make it easier to brush on, because when you're using a thick glue it's a bit harder to brush on. But I don't want it so runny that it's dripping all over the place and it doesn't stay in place. So you'll know once you start working with it. Alright guys, so I'm using an old book. Now I know a lot of people get upset when they see old books being torn apart. This was saved out of the trash can. It was missing a cover and some pages, and it's really old, and the reason why I'm using this one, even though the pages are kind of brittle, is because I like the color of the aged paper, and I think it goes nicely with an old trunk. So to get it off its spine, I've already removed that other cover that was still on there, and again, because the pages are so brittle, I can just put my ruler down and just pull up, and there's my pages are removed from the spine, and I'll just do a pile So when you're doing a technique like this, you want to make sure all the edges are torn because it'll stick better and also looks better when you're done. So I'll just do a few pages at a time and I'll just tear. And again, so brittle, it's super easy for me to do this. If you're using a newer book, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you. You can use the ruler to do all the edges if you wanted to. And I leave some big and some I'll do smaller. These kind of projects are so wonderful because it helps you honor an old book. I'm kind of sentimental that way. This would be in the trash today if I didn't rescue it. And it's The Old Curiosity Shop, written by Charles Dickens, and he's one of my favorite authors. So I'm more than happy to give honor to that old book and put it to good use. So that feels really glued in there, and like I said, once I add the book pages, this whole piece is going to be like one solid unit. I will never worry about it falling apart. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to flip this over. I'll just do the bottom first and I'll show you how I did the trunk itself. So I like my pages, it doesn't matter, everyone's going to be different, but I like my text to be going in the same direction. And obviously we're going to have to only do one side at a time, so we'll do one side and let it dry and then we can flip it over. So I've wrapped the glue around the edge and the top, and I'll put glue on this side and on this side. I'll do a small section at one time. Okay, so now I can just stick a page down. So the next piece I put on is going to have a little bit of space between this one. I'll wrap it over. And then I'll do a piece like, it doesn't matter how you do this. So once I have my pieces laid down, then I take the glue again and I just go over top. And now I can just put another piece like that. And you just keep going, you keep layering until the entire surface is covered in your book paper. And the trick is not to put dry pages on top of dry pages. You want to put the pages on top of glue each time you put a layer down. These little clip-on fans are so great for projects like this. And that just helps speed the drying time up, of course. And now I can flip this over and work on the other side. Alright guys, I'm going to give you another tip when you're working on joining edges like this. It's always better to overlap. Do a big overlap with your book pages because it adds so much more strength to the end project. I'll add my glue in here. If you layer these joining pieces in such a way, it becomes so strong. So this one I'm going to just lay it in there, make sure it overlaps on both edges there. I'll add my glue. And I'm using my paintbrush to tap the paper into place. Okay, so my next piece, I will do it this way. And now this one, I will do this way. So I stacked some things in there, put it here, made sure I can still close this, and I can. So I added a pencil line, and then I measured from that pencil line to here. So that's 2.5 inches, so I know that I need to put a brace in here, 2.5 inches from this. So I've already started making them, and I'm doing it out of thick cardboard. I had some thick cardboard on hand. I just made 3 strips. Here's one that's already drying, and I'm going to glue this to the side, and now I just need to glue these pieces together. Now I can just stack these. I just got one brace installed, and I'm going to do the other one on camera. I'm using tacky glue and hot glue together. Alright, so I'm going to be measuring 2.5 inches. I'm going to use a felt pen to mark my lines. And like I said, I'm going to use tacky glue and hot glue together. So hot glue will just hold it together while the tacky glue dries. Grabs on to the wall and holds it up in place while that tacky glue does its job. I'm going to be adding book pages over this anyway, but just to keep in place while I get the book pages ready, the hot glue will do a great job of holding everything up for me. So those are dry, and I've already tested them, and they work great, and they're very, very sturdy. And I had a little bit of paper left. This is all that I had left from that book that I started off with. Wow, I can't believe I used all those pages. So I have this little bit left. So I thought I would add a little extra piece here in the center, which will help me pick up the piece from the center. So just 2 pieces of that thick cardboard. Here it is here. And then I just cut out some slots and glued them on either side. So now I'm going to add the paper over top. Alright, we're in the next morning now, and it's all dry, and I'm really glad that I added that little piece there, because it does make a difference when you're picking up the tray to have that little extra piece to hang on to. And then this little quote here, it doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. I'm just leaving that there until I can find an old ad. I was looking for an old ad for a telephone company, but I couldn't find one online that would fit in here and that would look nice. So until I do find one, I'll just keep that there. This is Bummer, my old bear. He just wanted to come over and say this trunk was old bear approved. He was rescued as well. He's falling apart, missing most of his mohair. But I've had him for quite some time now, and he sits over there and keeps me company. Anyway guys, I hope this video gave you some ideas to restore an old trunk or an old toolbox if you ever find one. And if you do, I'd sure love to see pictures of it. You could post pictures on my Facebook page, Where the Gnomes Live. Until then, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and we'll see you super soon.